In Jamaica, this was our first capital and is perhaps the most important post-Columbian site in the New World, something that we have not fully recognized of its value and the stories it can tell us. As a result of these voyages, he was titled Duke of Jamaica and Admiral of the Seas. The island ended up being in the possession of the Colon family until it was captured by the English 145 years later. The Jews settled here is a vexed question, answered simply yes and no. Jamaica never had an inquisition to test conversos. Perhaps one reason was the Colon family. Another could have been the economy. No gold or silver was found in the island. Spanish Jamaica was a small settlement growing animals for the conquistadors. There were something like 12 hatos or ranches, without fences of course, to grow these animals. There were no plantations under the Spanish, and so with no major economic activity, there was similarly no major religious activity encouraging any tests such as an auto de fe. So if there were conversos, they were not exposed and therefore not reported to exist. If they practiced Judaism, they did not make it public, so we do not know, but we believe that some did. There were reports that there were two sets of Spaniards, Christian and Converso, who met the English when they captured the island 145 years later. Escovel was the first governor and Garay his deputy. Garay invested in growing sugar, and the sugar mill at Seville was constructed for Garay in circa 1517, and it still exists, possibly and almost certainly the oldest in the Americas. It was reported that the production of sugar was under the guidance of some conversos who were brought here. They were brought for that purpose. Why and from where could have been from Madeira. They knew how to grow and process sugarcane in that island. These conversos brought here were known as Portugals, possibly given that name to allow them to come to the Spanish lands because the union between Spain and Portugal had not yet begun. So, were these the first Jews in Jamaica? Yes and no. The people of Jewish origin with Jewish names from Portugal, but not known to have practiced Judaism. The The Spanish Empire grew and grew, the wealth generated from the gold and silver from the Americas. England was concerned, and so Cromwell, having abolished the monarchy, undertook to send an attack to the Spanish Main, or rather to attack the Spanish Main. That is the sea routes of the wealth upon the mines of their country. He tried to attack the Dominican Republic first and was rebuffed. This Penn and Venables led expedition came to Jamaica after and succeeded. Jamaica was a prime site for the English with its safe and large Kingston Harbor. The Penn and Venables expedition attacked in May 1655 and literally walked to the capital, San Diego de la Vega, now known as Spanish Town. It was reported that about half the population fled. These were the old Spanish or Catholic Spanish families, and half the others met the English, who were possibly descendants of conversos and the African servants of the Spanish. All told, the population at that time did not exceed 3,000 people. It was not a hard island to capture, especially when I think the English brought something like 14,000 people on their ships. After skirmishes lasting for nearly 4 years, and that ended with what is known as the Battle of Rio Nuevo or Cabeza, the English took control and started to invite settlers, almost regardless of their religious beliefs, to settle. Part of the reason, of course, was that there was a very short number of people in the population, and so they needed to have more people to be able to help to protect themselves and the island from all others. Port Royal became possibly the most important entrepot in the Americas, hosting free trade, but it had other so-called attributes. One such attribute was the fact that they were buccaneers. They had been called over to be able to attack the Spanish shipping as licensed, as our licensed army, so to speak. And after the Treaty of Madrid in 1670, these buccaneers eventually decided that they had to continue their looting, and they became known as pirates. And that's a whole other story, which there is an argument and a book that claims that we with the Jewish pirates of the Caribbean is part of our ancestry and our heritage.
And now I understand why my grandma said in her hospital bed to me that she had a yaya. The yaya, he was Jewish. I didn't understand. Her father was an Englishman, she said. I said, what are you what? We were escaping slavery. Now it all makes perfect sense. And so we've been told this history back to front. Okay, so over the past, let's say, couple of weeks, but years, I've said so many things, shown so many things, and I realize, like a lot of people, or maybe it's not a lot, I don't know, but some of us, we are ostracized for wanting to know the truth in its entirety. There was a lot of things I couldn't say, and I had to go about things in other ways to get the point across. The last video, once again, they don't want you to see it. They don't want to push it either, because it has information in there which will turn what they've been telling you this whole time upside down. When I gave you the story about the eunuch in this context, in this Bible that we have right now, how did it come across? And so if we recall, slavery was condoned through the slave Bible. Slaves, obey your masters. So when we say this Bible is the infallible word of God, you're not making entire sense. Because if that's the case, if you're like me, then you should obey your master and shut up. So what I'm saying is that the context is essential, because in this context, from Genesis 1, the Bible in its entirety might be influenced by the real manuscript. But remember, there was lots of different councils, and Nicene Council is Roman. So why would Rome, who on the Sistine Chapel shows you who the Holy Ones is in their mind, want everybody to open the Bible and feel free? Also, have you looked at the pictures? If that is Adam, then Genesis 1, when it speaks about being set apart, it can't be talking about the original Hebrews, can it? So when you're reading this scripture in your hand, it's not about you. Who is it about? The children of Israel, not the parents. I have to say it like that, because how else am I going to get this point across when people aren't really reading between the lines? Here's the thing. Every book that we have isn't as much as the Ethiopian Bible, okay? And when I say the eunuch was given the Bible, right? I'm speaking in this context that we have today, because Deuteronomy today in this version paints a different picture to the version that the Ethiopian Bible has of that same eunuch. And that was my point.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing what?
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah, I wish that was funny.
I'm not saying that the truth isn't the truth. I'm saying that the version you have is not. And therefore, how can you serve the God that you say you're serving, or Jesus in spirit and truth, when the context that you have currently isn't the right one? And if you want to argue with me about it, but then call on Ethiopia at the same time, then you're not making sense, because Ethiopia's version is not the same. Now, with that in mind, I would say go and look it out, because when we speak about even the story about Cain and Abel, they are brothers, but each of them has a sister who is a twin. And this is where the fall of man in that concept, this is where it actually happens. And so when we sit down and we have all these isms, especially the one that begins with R, you've got to remember that the fall, even that, which is a link to the book of Enoch, happened through two brothers with the same mother and father. So when I said years ago, when we get to the end, you're going to realize that everybody is guilty by default, unfortunately, apart from those that they call the blameless Ethiopians. Now, when I said that before the Ethiopians was the Ethiopian, I haven't changed on that, because that's the crux of the story in general. But what they did do was keep the true essence of the original Jesus and the story. And why is that even relevant today? Well, if you see, right now, we're finding out that these high-profile people use spirituality. If you haven't heard about Mr. Steen, I won't say the first part, and what he was given to bless his endeavors, his dirty endeavors. Clearly, I'm telling the truth, am I not? Okay? So clearly spirituality does have a place. It does matter. When people say, oh, what's the point? This is what people have been building their wealth their fame and reputation on by using something sacred. But if you haven't noticed, that place of the land of the free is falling, and so are other places, not because necessarily of the place, but of the acts of what's going on there. And that should be the evidence that it's all coming full circle. Because when you line up the story of Cain and Abel to videos I've given you in the past, then the place that was originally Africa is not the Africa of today.
Central Mexico is one of the world's most impressive archaeological sites. Few cities in the world have been considered worthy of being inhabited by gods, who are accustomed to occupying loftier realms than those peopled by mere mortals.
So this one book shows you that it even says that America went and colonized the whole world. So it's dedicated to Alice de Le Plombion, which is the author's wife. He says, "My constant companion during my explorations of the ruined cities of the Mayas, who, in order to obtain a glimpse of the history of their builders," the original Masons, I think. Yeah. What do we think? Pyramid makers.
What was the date that you said?
Oh, well, it was made in 1896, but...
Because the Rothschilds came in 1858. The first Jewish...
Well. So page 35 from this book, this is online. The reading of the Maya inscriptions and books, among other very interesting subjects, reveals the origin of many narratives that have come down to us as traditions in the sacred books of various nations, and which are regarded by many as inexplicable myths. For instance, we find in them the history of certain personages who, after their death, became the gods are most universally revered by the Egyptians, Isis and Osiris, whose earthly history, related by Wilkinson and other writers who regarded it as a myth, corresponds exactly to that of Queen Mu. So these are real people who have been put into stories. Mm-mm. And her brother/husband.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we never heard that. Prince Ko, his charred heart was found by me, preserved in a stone urn in his, or maybe his actual heart, in his mausoleum at Chichen. I've been there, Chichen Itza. Osiris, we are told, was killed his brother through jealousy and became his murderer. Cain and Abel. You hear it there? Mm. Wished to seize the reins of the government. He made war against the widow, his own sister, who he came to hate bitterly after having been
someone that was sleeping
being
with
madly
sister.
In love with her.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why you shouldn't be on the inside. No.
Do you think it was actually sometimes to say sister and it doesn't mean
no.
that? Okay, maybe, but who knows? Yeah. Okay. In these same books, we learn the true meaning of the tree of knowledge in the middle of the garden, of the temptation of the woman by the serpent offering her a fruit. Now, you know that the Amarukans are called Nagas, which are serpents. Where does this come from? Nagas.
Nagas.
In these same books, we learn the true meaning of the tree of knowledge in the middle of the garden, of the temptation of the woman by the serpent offering her a fruit. This offering of a fruit as a declaration of love, which was common occurrence in everyday life of the Mayas, Egyptians and Greeks, losses all the seeming incongruity it presents in the narrative of Genesis for lack of a word of explanation. But this shows how very simple facts have been, and still are, made use of by crafty men, such as the high priest Hilkiah, to devise religious speculations.
Here we go with this high priest.
And imposed on the good faith of ignorant, credulous and superstitious masses.
Come on.
It is on the story of the courting of Queen Mu by Prince Ayak, the murderer of her husband, purposely disfigured by the scheming Jewish priest Hilkiah, who made the woman appear to have yielded to her tempter, perhaps out of spite against the prophetess Huldah, she having refused to countenance his fraud and to become his accomplice in it in one Tidar and the kingdom. Because, by the way, the lineage was through women.
Yeah.
This whole king thing wasn't a thing. And since you disrespected women, our kingdom fell.
Inspired Jack Sparrow. John Ward was the inspiration for the character of Captain Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the Caribbean films. Ward's nickname was Sparrow, and he was known for his flamboyant style, much like the Hollywood icon. The real Captain Sparrow, who later converted to Islam, joined the Ottomans and took the name Captain Yusuf. He was a captain who was loved by his crew because he did not discriminate based on religion or color.